we are going to proceed. Today we're gonna stop at 4:30, and if we don't get through your item, then you don't have a budget next year. And I'm sorry. Right, you're on the rec list.
Do I get to pick who goes first?
No. So, let's begin. We're going to start with the Office of Agriculture, and yes, lights will be on, and there is a number of items in the packet. I think I can sort of help make the discussion more efficient by saying on the page 4, staff is recommending a fall review of the Office of Agriculture and its implementation efforts to meet the needs of the county's agricultural industry. I think it'd be really productive to sit down and kind of talk about the overall vision. You know, this is one of several functions of the county that were part of the mix as we shifted from a county department of DED to a private entity, and we've restructured and found a new home for OAG, and I think it's time to talk about the policy issues a little bit more, so I'm in agreement about that. Jeremy, do you have any, we're going to go back into the substance, but I thought I'd start with, in some ways, the most interesting part first, which is, do you have any comment on that? Michelle, would you like to join us just to make a quick comment on that, or you're good, it's up to you, but this kind of opportunity to tackle a bigger conversation about the economic development in the ag industry here.
Thank you, Hans, members of the PHED committee, Jeremy Chris, Office of Agriculture. No, I think that having an opportunity in the fall to go over the progress of the office is a great idea. This coming July, we'll be celebrating our 3rd anniversary. We've been doing some really exciting things in the 3 years that we've been an independent functioning office. So I think that that would be a really good opportunity, and I would welcome that.
Terrific. All right, we'll do that. And I would just say I appreciate your bringing you're inviting many of the leaders of our ag industry here. And they are here with us. We've got Bob Sissel with Montgomery Agricultural Producers. We've got Robert Butts. Where's Robert? All right. He was here. All right, let the record show he was here. He's off making wine, right? So Doug Leckleiter is here. Where's Doug? There he is. And Michael Jameson. All right, there he is. Michelle Kropp with the Farm Bureau. Michelle. Linda Lewis. And Chuck Schuster. All right, terrific. Did I miss anybody? No. Yes? No. Okay. Thank you. Let's go through. So there are a few savings in this packet, which I think, I know one of the items, my colleagues have some ideas about how we can not take savings. And
Sure.
all right, so let's proceed.
Sure. The executive is recommending $966,373 for the Office of Agriculture in fiscal 20. This is a slight reduction over the fiscal 19 appropriation, but it's a continued reduction over the several years that the Office of Ag has been in existence, which is primarily the reason I think it'll be good to have a fall review, just to make sure we're supporting not only that office, but our businesses in the agricultural community. We'll just go ahead and jump into the reductions that were recommended during the fiscal 20 budget. So we'll start with the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation. This is the Ag in the Classroom, as it's known. It's a very popular program with MCPS and our students. The reduction is $33,000, $33,473. It's almost a 50% reduction. And as staff notes from the Office of Ag, this will reduce the number of days that this program will run from 129 to 48. I will turn over to Councilmember Dwanda, who has in the packet submitted a recommendation to return that funding in the reconciliation list, and I'll also note that it wasn't included in the packet, but also sent out to his colleagues a memo from Councilmember Rice about that as well.
Okay, so we're under item B, Maryland Agricultural Educational Foundation, and this is the savings proposed that affects that mobile program. So, Mr. Dwanda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great to see all of our great ag community here. And I know and I've got some visits coming up after the budget here. I'm looking forward to that, being outside as opposed to here. So, Director Chris, we had spoken about this program. I wanted to give you the opportunity to describe the current utility, and my understanding is that you've applied for a grant for this program. I am proposing to restore it. I think I've heard from MCPS, I've heard from you, that this program is a great way to connect our kids to agriculture, but also to outside, and get them learn about what they're eating and where their food comes from. And it's a relatively small investment, and I know my colleague on the Education Culture Committee, Councilmember Rice, is also in favor of restoring this funding. So could you talk to me about anything you want to add on the program, but also just give me the latest on the grant? Maybe there's an update or something. I think my understanding is you're applying for a grant that would take care of some of this if you got it, but you don't know yet. Is that correct?
So that's correct. And before I begin answering your question, I just want to take a moment to introduce my staff that's here. I have
yes,
Mike
please.
Scheffel here to my left. He was hired this past September as our new Farmland Preservation Administrator. And so we're really happy to have Mike on board. You'll recall John Zalatowski. He was the former Farmland Preservation Administrator, but now he's working as the Soil Conservation District Manager as one of our agency partners, along with the University of Maryland Extension that Chuck Schuster is here representing. So the last person I want to introduce is really the most important, and that's Jackie Arnold right back here. She's my right-hand assistant, and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without her. And she's just lovely to have and very, very helpful.
Thank you, Jackie.
So the Maryland Ag Education Foundation, I'm sure you've seen the ag tags on the cars. When you get that type of tag, Farms Are Our Future, $20 of the registration goes to the Maryland Ag Education Foundation for these labs to be available statewide. And what we started to do in FY14 is to talk about how we could have a lab assigned to Montgomery County, because what was happening prior to that, a lab would only be able to go to a specific school if the school could accommodate it. There's some expenditures associated with transporting the lab to the school. There's some expenses associated with the hookup of 220 electric and also a water source. So there's some details that have to be worked out. So under George Leventhal, he felt that we really should try to have a lab assigned to Montgomery County, and that was the discussion, and that took place for the first time in FY15. And we've been doing a really good job having the lab rotated to elementary schools starting in September all the way through June. So for FY19, the total number of schools is 27 schools using the current level of funding that we have, and it's about 129 days total. With this 4% reduction, we have proposed will enable the lab to visit schools, about 13 total schools, or about 48 days. The reason that this item was chosen for the 4% reduction is because in the 3 years that the Office of Ag has been in place, we've already had to reduce our budget through previous reductions and savings plans in the amount of $127,000. I just couldn't.
You didn't want to lose the money in other core program areas.
That's right. When I looked at the core mission of the Office of Ag to help the people that are behind me, that are paying into the tax base, that are farming and producing food and employing people, that's the core mission of the Office of Ag. I believe that educating our children is critically important, but you know, I had to make a decision based on the fiscal reality that the county is in. So that is why I identified this item, and it wasn't an easy choice, but I then went to the Edward Byrd Foundation. Joe and Ed Byrd, they were real interesting guys. They lived on Sugarland Road, which is just west of Dawsonville. They never married, they never had children, and they farmed. And so when they were getting up in years, they were very much interested in helping children that were interested in opportunities for agriculture. So they created this endowment. and a foundation and a board of directors. Eric Spates is one of our farmers in the county. He's on the board. Bo Carlisle is a resident of the Ag Reserve and has a well and septic business. Him and his daughter Tina are on the board. So I've been following the board, and they've been providing grants to a number of different organizations starting in last year. They gave $50,000 to the Montgomery County Farm Bureau, and Michelle and the board, they're using that money to expand their scholarship program for students that want to go into an ag curriculum. The Byrd Foundation also granted $50,000 to the Maryland Ag Education Foundation at the statewide office, and that money is being used for the lab to go to statewide schools, not specific to Montgomery
So
County.
you applied for a grant with them?
Yeah, that's the organization that I applied the grant
Okay.
for. And
Okay.
so Scott Harlow is the Board of Trustees, the attorney, and he says that this request is on the list, but it's one of several that the
Sure.
board will have
So-
to review and approve.
Got it. So what I propose then is, and while I understand your concern with the core budget and why you had to make the tough decisions, what I'm proposing is that we would restore this funding, and then if the grant comes through, then you could use that money for other ag purposes, other purposes within your budget. Let me be clear about that. You wouldn't have to return the money. That's what I'm, can we structure
Well, you
it that
probably
way?
can't allow them to use the money they get from a grant for other purposes, but you're saying
No, I'm talking about the
this
money,
that
this
we
money,
provide.
if it gets restored. Obviously, it's got to get on the reconciliation list and get off, but, Gene, is that
Yeah, I mean,
allowable?
if the council makes an appropriation and it's not needed, then the office has discretion for other operating expenses.
So, I mean, that would be, it's $33,000, and I know Councilmember Rice wants to chime in, but, if that's amenable to my colleagues, that's what I would recommend. I think as we're trying to make sure we value our environment and value the role of agriculture, and a 50% cut in the program is not something I think we want to see. And obviously, we're going to have the larger discussion that we just said on the role of your office in general, which I think will provide us some guidance on your budgets in the future, so that would be my
Okay.
recommendation.
I think there's probably, I'm willing to support Mr. Friedson.
Thank you for that. I'm very supportive as well. I was glad you sent the memo that you did. You beat me to the memo, and I am proud to share the Agricultural Reserve with as district council members with Councilmember Rice, and he then sent a memo reemphasizing that support, and I thought that 2 memos were enough. We wanted to make sure that there were trees in the Ag Reserve, so I just walked down the hall and said, "Hey, this is really good. We should do this," and so I'm hopeful that was sufficient. But the way I see it is, you've been focusing from a programmatic standpoint on tending the crops, and this is really about planting the seeds. And I think we got to do both. And I totally understand that you have to make a choice, and I think you made the appropriate choice with limited resources of taking care of the plants out of the ground, but we got to plant seeds in the ground to make sure that we have crops next season. And, that's really how I view this. I think it's a successful program. I think it speaks to what the Agricultural Reserve means to the community, not just in land conservation and environmental sustainability, but also in our agricultural heritage, our economic potential, and making sure that we are sharing that with our school-aged population to ensure the sustainability of our agricultural community is critical. So I am incredibly appreciative of the proposal, and I support that as well, and look forward to moving forward with some other questions to make sure that you have the resources that you need in order to do the important work that you do for our farm community, because it is such a critical part of where we have been and who we are and who we've been and where we are and where we're going. And I want to make sure that we're doing what we can. You've worked on an extremely lean budget, and I want to make sure that we are providing you with the resources, Mr. Chris, that you need to support the folks, many of whom are here and many of whom aren't, who rely on the office every day for the critical work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Friedson. for continuing to support this great initiative. Let me just say that when I held the Montgomery County Ag Forum, one of the things that we heard from our young people is how important it is to have opportunities for them to be able to make sure that they can pitch to folks why our agricultural reserve is so important. I mean, we need to remind people that our agricultural reserve is 1/3 of our land mass, 93,000 acres of Montgomery County. It is an economic engine. It is not just a place to visit. It's not just a place where some farmers are that are doing something. They are generating huge amounts of money for our overall economy and do a great job when it comes to environmental sustainability as well. And so from that perspective, you know, one of the concerns that I have that Mr. Chair, you brought up at the very beginning in the opening of this packet and when we went to page 4 is why we continue to invest less in something that is economic development that also represents 1/3 of our land mass, 93,000 acres, and helps with environmental sustainability. I mean, it's interesting because I don't hear the folks from climate change talking about investing in our ag reserve. I'd love to hear them say that. You know, because that's incredibly important. And so when we do these kinds of things, I hope that we get credit when it comes to making sure that we're addressing climate change, because that's what happens when we're planting crops, when we're doing the kinds of things that farmers do when it comes to no-till, something that we're now being nationally lauded for, that we've been doing for a very long time here in Montgomery County, that others are just getting on board with. But all these things came about regarding education, and that's how I tie these things together. My mother, who many of the farmers know, is right now down in South Carolina. Just caught a few pike fish this morning and called me about that. Is her and her brothers and sisters who all grew up on a farm that is still down in rural South Carolina, and it's that impact from what they told me about, and I was able to see, that helped me to be a more rounded person who understood the importance of farming and the overall value of our environment. And so that's the kind of thing that we can provide for these children, which is why it needs to be supported. But even more so to why I hope that when you do your more general meeting, I would like to be a part to also talk about how we can continue to expand our Office of Agriculture, because I think that not only are additional resources needed, but additional ideas about how we can do even more to support 1/3 of Montgomery County. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for my colleagues' leadership.
Thank you. All right, so I think we have agreement to add the funding for the program onto the reconciliation list, and there were no other staff recommended.
Actually, there was only one. The executive recommended adding $5,000 for the Champion Trees program, and as staff notes, it's the Department of Environmental Protection that has been running this program. OMB indicated that it wasn't really clear how this transfer occurred, so staff recommends that we transfer it, although I will also note that we have not received any amendments from the executive yet regarding the fiscal 20 budget, and so they could also be done through that. Either way, the Office of Ag indicated that they did not run the program, and so it made more sense to return it back to the Department of Environmental Protection.
All right, we will send it back to DEP, which runs a variety of tree programs.
Yep.
Okay.
Just wanted to
Mr.
say
Chris.
thank you very much for the comments and the support for the farm community, the farmers behind me. I want to say thank you very much for the farmers that are here to support me and the entire ag community. Gene, thanks for the packet, very informative, and so.
Yeah, thank you. I wish we could spend more time today just working through and talking about issues, but today's not that day.
In front of you, there's a document that goes on a little further than what Gene has on Circle 8 of his packet. This is our Marbitco Cost Share Grant Program. It's something that we started in FY18. The top block is for those properties that we looked at in FY18. The ones in the bottom are 19. On the back of the chart is a letter from Mark Grossman. He's a Montgomery County school teacher. He's a part-time table food producer. He is telling you how important the $2,844 helped him with the deer fence and how it's going to help him earn at least $20,000 additional product this year for keeping the deer out. And in the long term, he hopes it'll get up to as high as $100,000. And this, the first time in a decade, he's been able to provide a salary for himself, and he's paying a little bit higher wages for his 2 employees. So
That's great.
This chart helps to illustrate what we're doing in terms of job creation with some of these small and beginning farmers. So I just wanted you to see that.
Thank you for your help with all of those farmers. They need you. I've been out to One Acre Farm quite a few times, just as an example. I see they've been able to, get access to funding through that. I heard a lot from Mike there about how some of the development had pushed a lot of deer his way, and it was killing his crops. So you've got, you helped them get a deer fence and some
Yes,
other
sir.
items, and I think it's been a huge help there among many examples. So thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, just quickly wanted to ask, 'cause I wanted to ask about Marbidco, and I appreciate how important it is. And you've taken some cuts, and I wanted to just, whether it's Marbidco specifically or more broadly, I know this was part of your savings plan of pushing off from FY19 to FY20, and just wanted to get a quick sense of what impact that has on folks who could rely on and could really use the help from that funding, and whether or not there's a need for more funding, particularly in that program, or if there is another aspect of this that you're, a program that you would like to do that you've been foregoing because of these repeated savings plans that have really hit the department and the office in a significant way.
Thank you for asking that question. The FY19 savings plan, $14,553. How is that part of the Office of Ag? I explained at a previous Fed committee work session that I was going to be delaying the payments for some of the Marbidco cost share grants until after July 1st. I was also asked if I would include my savings plan as part of the 4% permanent reduction for 20. I said, no, I'm not doing that because I value what we're doing here. I think that I have very little money to work with, but I'm trying to take just a little bit of money and spread it around to help everybody that I can. If I had more money, I could have more partnerships with Steve McHenry at Marbidco. It's a great relationship. And every time we've got a new project, I know Jackie's excited about it, and so whenever Jackie's excited, that's good because it makes coming to work that much better, So I'm doing the best I can with the appropriation I have, but if I have more money, absolutely, I could do more.
Lean and green, which we appreciate, but to Councilmember Rice's point, I think we really do need to be investing and valuing it. And I think to Councilmember Jawando, I do believe if you get that foundation money, which I hope you do, that this money can be used towards Marbidco or another program within it. And I hope that when we reconvene and have the more strategic conversation, that even if you don't get that grant, that you come back with, a few ideas of things that you really think will have the most significant impact after, speaking to the agricultural community and the farmers, and also to partners, of how we can leverage some of that money to make the most impact. And if need be, that we think about funding it either for next year, an increase, or a supplemental, or some type of additional support. But I think that would be the more appropriate time to do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
We could also add 15,000 to the Marbidco grant pool.
I would love to do that.
Reconciliation. You want to do that? Not opposed? All right, so let's add that to the
So moved or
reconciliation.
seconded, whichever.
I don't know. It's done. How about that? All right,
15,000.
thank you. Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
And we'll get an update on that when we come back.
Absolutely.
And we'll hear about the grant, and if you've got, we'll hear about many items when we come back.
Thank you.
Okay. Bob? Hey, thank you, Jeremy. You're being recognized. Your terrific work is much appreciated. The farming community is really grateful for your very hard work and your diligence and your knowledge of the county and all your work with us.
Working for the farm community of Montgomery County is totally the best privilege I've ever had, and I've devoted my career to it, and I know they believe in me, and I believe in them, and that's why they're here today. So thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you.
And you've I'm sure you have the budget memorized too, so which is always impressive.
Unfortunately, there's not enough there to memorize, you know.
Yeah, we're trying our best to make it tougher to remember.
Okay,
And staff will understand if
idea.
there was no objections, that the rest of it was approved as
correct.
perfect.
Okay, now let's go to the CVB.
Certainly, and we are joined by Ms. Groff and Mr. Van Horn from the Visit Montgomery, or the Conference and Visitors Bureau.
And we're going to do the NDA for the conference center next, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Staff will just note real quick that the CVB's funding is a dedicated source at 7% from the hotel and motel tax each year, which makes complete sense since what Ms. Groff and her team does is to market and promote the county to encourage more people to be here for events and weekends in the hotels and motels and therefore generate more revenue. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Groff and have her do a quick presentation of her fiscal 20 work plan.
Thank you, Jean. Good afternoon.
Kelly?
Thanks for having us. I just want to recognize a few people in the audience today here for support. Vera Safai, hotel owner, professor at Montgomery College in the hospitality program.
Please raise your name, raise your
And
hand when your name is called. Yes, thank you.
Vera, and board member. Ruth O'Rourke, who manages the hospitality program at University of Maryland, Shady Grove, or University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, Shady Grove, and Tricia Swanson from the Montgomery County Chamber.
Excellent.
We're going to walk through a few slides today. As Jean mentioned, our mission really is to get people from outside of the area to come and visit, whether they're here for leisure travel, youth sports, meetings, conventions. Montgomery County leverages a 7% lodging tax. Montgomery County government reinvests a portion of that tax into our program to market the county. Our target markets are outside of Montgomery County, although we do some marketing in Washington, D.C. We have 6 full-time and 1 part-time position. We have 2 divisions, a marketing division and a sales division. On slide 3, this is just a snapshot of kind of the development. We had a hotel close in 2017, a hotel close in 2018. We just had a hotel open in Silver Spring, Home 2 Suites. In 2021, we have an AC by Marriott opening in downtown Bethesda, a Residence Inn Silver Spring, and in 2022, when Marriott relocates to downtown Bethesda, we will have another property there next to their corporate headquarters. Metrics. Every year we partner with the Maryland Department of Commerce, their tourism division, to conduct a study on the economic impact of travel and tourism. It's done in each county in the state of Maryland, in Baltimore City and Ocean City. Unfortunately, the data is delayed because of the research. So the most recent data is 2017. We saw 3.5% growth in visitation, 3.8% growth in tourism spending, basically what tourists spend when they come to Montgomery County. Slide 5, hotel tax collections from...
Wait, sorry, can you just go back quickly?
Sure.
You said you saw a growth, summarize that again?
3.5% growth in visitation, in number of visitors,
Okay.
from 16 to 17.
Uh-huh.
3.8% growth in visitor spending in the local economy from 2016 to 2017.
How come we don't have 2018 numbers yet? What time do we get those?
We will have them in the fall of 2019.
Okay, great. That's good. We're getting more traction. Well, I guess it's good. The growth rate was. That's good. Okay. Did you think it's good, or what's your assessment?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Okay.
The next slide, slide 5, shows, though, that hotel tax collections were really soft from fiscal year 17 to 18. In fiscal year 19, we expect the same due to the government shutdown. So we immediately felt that impact, as did the county, in tax collections in January and February. We don't have March figures yet, but the Airbnb short-term rental market, however, is definitely growing in Montgomery County. It's recognized now as an industry sector. Hosts have to register in Montgomery County. We collect the lodging taxes. So from fiscal year 2017 to 2018, there was a 45% growth in revenues in that short-term
the
rental market.
Short-term rental market.
Yes. There's a big
Still
swing
not
and
that
shift.
big. It's interesting. I mean, it's growing, but When I go on, I don't see a ton of stuff, so it's interesting. What is the relative share of the revenues from short-term rental versus hotel?
The hotel sector is much larger.
Is it like
Yes.
90-10 or 95-5 or?
It's probably 90-10.
Yeah. Okay.
Slides 6 through 15 basically outline our marketing and sales programming, but in the essence of time, I'm going to scoot to slide 15, which is kind of where we are year to date on some of the highlights of our successes. We just talked about tourism expenditure increases and tourism visitation increases. Corey, our director of marketing, has been with us about a year and a half and is extremely talented. It has really helped us take our marketing to the next level. Our email database grew 181%. We partnered with a Silver Spring company called Localist to implement a platform for our calendar events, which is doing very well. We have accelerated our public relations effort, which is our job to go out and get people to write really nice things about the county so people will visit. It also helps in overall economic development if we have good stories about our community out there. 72 press clippings with an ad equivalency of about $800,000.
I follow you on Instagram, and you do like this weekend in Montgomery County, and I can't remember what, but I recently went to something that was, really fun and a great afternoon because I saw it on your feed. So
Great.
Keep it up. Thanks.
We have 2 destination sales managers. Their job is to go outside of the community, meet with corporate meeting planners, specifically in the pharma market, tour and travel. And we have 2 really good sales managers now, so they've increased their bookings year over year by 66%. We also secured some conferences here in the county that are coming for the first time, which these 2 destination sales managers were able to pull off.
66% year over year increase?
Yes. So they're equivalent to a business development salesperson you would see in an economic development office.
That's a lot.
Slide 16, these are our overall strategic goals. We developed a strategic plan in fiscal year 18, which we started to implement in 19. It carries on for 3 years. Overall, there's not too many new initiatives in fiscal year 20 because we're all kind of budget restricted, but we're going to be subscribing to AirDNA to kind of learn more about what is happening in the short-term rental market locally, but also in the region. We have a partnership on some grants that we've pulled from the Maryland Office of Tourism, and we're really pushing kind of the leisure weekend marketing initiatives because occupancy in hotels drops about 10 to 15% weekday to weekend.
Weekends are less booked than weekdays?
Correct.
That's interesting. Is this that means a lot of business travel basically, or what does that mean?
Correct.
Yeah. Andrew.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I noticed you're trying to do some programming to try to address that. My understanding has been the whole DC region has that same issue. Downtown DC, that's a huge challenge, and it's reflected when I have people visiting that they're shocked that in a expensive place like the DC suburbs or in the district itself, how inexpensive a weekend hotel room is. And I talk to people who come here for business, and they talk about how expensive a weekday hotel room, and I assume that's lobbying, corporate, regulatory, all of the huge industries we have is usually a Monday through Friday. But is that, I know that anecdotally, but is that borne out? This is a broad regional challenge that the rates are much more significant. We also have like school groups and other field trips are happening during the week as opposed to, weekend tourism, which is not as much what we do here. Is that true, not just in Montgomery County?
That's correct. And there's a lot of options in the region for the leisure travel for the weekend. National Harbor, Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, Montgomery, if you're not staying in DC. When DC has large events, we clearly feel that compression. And it's great for us, like the Marine Corps race or, the larger events really helps us, but they're not guaranteed every year. So year over year, things could swing if an event doesn't come back. For us, the Maryland Soccerplex is really a huge generator for the county and the up-county area for the youth tournaments, lacrosse and soccer that they generate. Wish they could take more events.
And we were talking when you came in, you partner with them to help find places for folks to stay and coordinating those efforts
Correct.
when they come in. So it's a really good partnership too.
Yes.
Not, okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And kind of following up, well, first, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah. And this role, and good to see you as well. It was related to the big events, right? I noticed when we had you mentioned Marine Corps, but I've also noticed it when we had the NCAA tournament hub here. You got, and when there's a big game or something, you get, especially near downtown Silver Spring or Bethesda, you see increased traffic. How are we marketing ourselves as kind of, in the context of large regional events? And do we focus on that? Is that something you all do? Is that kind of like, hey, it's not that far, or stay here, there's a lot to see while you're here? Or what's our messaging around that?
Do you want to answer, Claudia?
So you just asked a question that's near and dear to my heart, is how do we
good.
market the county, right? And so at this point, what we've learned in our research is Montgomery County is really promoting it as your weekend, your way. So almost a choose your own adventure type experience. And what makes the county amazing, and what I think is a draw for visitors, is the fact that we're a mix of downtown and country experiences. And so what we're finding is people who are visiting DC want to have the best of all those worlds. And so we're encouraging them to stay here, experience what makes Montgomery County a premier weekend destination. Sure, do your day trips into DC, but come back out and do all the amazing stuff here. To answer your question about weekend events and things like that, we are very keen on understanding where those events are, and then making sure that people are aware of them and ensuring that they stay here and go see them.
And I'm assuming, I know we do this, we're going to have our EDC conversation shortly, but we all market, I think rightfully so, the great diversity, obviously racial, ethnic, and cultural, and everything that we have here. That's obviously, I've seen some of your materials. I know every year when I see the list come out, and we're 3 of the top 10 most diverse cities, or 4, it was 4, we I think Rockville fell off, but we're still at least 3 with Gaithersburg, Silver Spring, and Germantown. How are you incorporating that in your messaging of like whether it's the food or all that?
Yep. Well, that is certainly one of our value differentiators as well, is truly the diversity. And, the tourism trends of today is that people are looking for local experiences, and they want to feel how the locals feel. And this is a place where that happens. And the area that we really, truly are able to promote the diversity in this county is through our events calendar. And it is the second most popular pages on our website, aside from our homepage. The reason why we partnered with Localist is because it gives us the ability to integrate with other calendars, with other organizations, and we're working towards those integrations now. And it is hugely popular. I mean, the way that we're able to even amplify that are things like through social media with our weekend roundups, where we post on the weekends, because we were finding spikes on Friday and Saturdays where people are looking for things to do on the weekends.
That's very helpful. Well, I'll defer the rest of the questions, but look forward to working with you all more to keep those numbers going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Thank you, council member.
Okay, keep going, or is that
I'm wrapping up.
Okay, good. All right, so what are the budget recommendations we have here, Gene?
Council staff recommends approval as
right.
recommended by the executive.
Great. I think we're in agreement. We will approve as recommended by the executive. Thank you for your work.
Thank
Hope we'll
you.
have the occasion to continue the dialogue in the coming year. Want to thank you. Remember the MoCo Made initiative that you kind of helped kickstart? I think that's starting to get some traction, so thanks for being there to be creative. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Moving on.
Actually, based on what the chair said, we're going to do the conference and the conference
Item
center.
Number 4.
Yeah, item number 4. As I'm joined by Ms. Benjamin, I'll just go ahead and jump in. The executive recommends a $662,514 appropriation for this NDA. This NDA fluctuates each year based on personnel expenditures and the $50,000 management audit that is biennial. So this is the year that we add that appropriation in for the management audit. As you can see on page 2, the Conference Center has been highly successful. It has generated revenue each year once it was completed, and staff recommends the executive's recommendation for this NDA, but executive staff are here to answer any questions you all may have regarding this budget.
All right, Mr. Friedson.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question. My understanding is after 2023, that's the end of the debt payment. I don't know if there are any balloon payments or anything like that, but just want to see what's the plan for after 2023. Is there a change to what's expected based on different revenue? Is that just, this is what we
No.
planned for, and now we have more money freed up now that that's finished, or what's the?
It's just a formality. The debt will be retired at that point in time. I think the more important thing is that the conference center itself, 50% of it is owned by the state of Maryland.
Right.
So when their debt is paid off, then the county owns 100% of the facility. And when the revenue authority's debt is retired in 2023, then everything will revert to Montgomery County government.
Okay, so in 2023, we own everything.
We own everything, land and building, yes.
Oh, terrific. Okay, great.
But that won't change anything related to the
Not
operations.
operationally, but just
Right.
as an asset.
Correct.
Great.
All right, I think this is an easy one.
Great, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Tina. Keep it up. Let's move on to the next item. We are in agreement about the conference and center.
Just taking notes. All right, now we're on to MCEDC.
All
So
right.
I'm-
So we'll welcome up David Petter, Bill Tompkins, Stacy Hardy, Sarah Miller.
We can be just as quick if you'd like to be.
We'll see. Usually isn't.
Sounded like a plea.
Yeah. Oh,
The
ouch.
last time I was sitting here was an hour and a half or so, which I know we said 4:30 today. We're going to be efficient.
All right. Well, we are. All right, let's go.
So the executive recommends level funding for this NDA in fiscal 20, $5,007,750. Similar to the other organizations we've looked at today, WorkSource, CVB, the county executes a contract with MCEDC to manage this and implement this appropriation. Executive staff are here today to answer any questions related to that contract. And as you can see on the various circle numbers, we see the proposed budget and work plan from MCDC. We can address some of the expenditure issues in a minute, but I'll turn it over to David and his team to introduce you all to their fiscal 20 work plan and operations.
All right. Great.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 5 slides. I think they're pretty substantive, but we'll work through them as efficiently as we can. First, starting with an economic snapshot, areas that we are feeling good about, areas that we've got concern, and areas that we have significant concern. Noted by green, yellow, red. Green being positive. Story's been in the press recently. We've been talking about just the amount of venture capital being offered to companies in Montgomery County, life sciences companies and beyond, $593 million in 2018 across 73 deals. A lot of this is happening in life sciences, but regionally we're standing out and we're promoting that in our marketing materials and our recruitment efforts for life sciences companies. It's important to note we have 1.65 million square feet of office space under construction in Bethesda. I know many of you suffer through current traffic challenges and see the cranes, but it's good to note that there is progress and prosperity happening in the county. We continue to get opportunity and interest due to our HQ2 work, not only our pitch and the name recognition that took place, but because of our partnership and regional collaboration with DC and Northern Virginia that continues to, I think, amplify our efforts on the business development stage as well as the talent development stage. We've been learning a lot through a program we've been doing with JLL specific to a life sciences study that there are some interesting niches of the stakeholder industries that we're going after. So we focus on life sciences, we focus on technology, cyber, advanced manufacturing, corporate headquarters, and financial services, but we also see opportunity in some of those verticals for social impact technology as well as perhaps gaming, and we're going to be even more, I think, micro-focused in our campaigns and our business outreach in the future based on that discovery and additional discoveries we're we're achieving through our partnerships.
What is social impact tech?
Social impact tech is taking the purpose-driven culture that we have here in Montgomery County and the DC region and applying that to an app or a technology. So marrying the good of people with a new app, so a different way to donate perhaps could be a technology. So it aligns to our cultural values as well as our technology strengths here in the county. We're very excited about the conduit of the Purple Line that's could connect Bethesda to College Park and the talent that will come to and fro between Montgomery County and the western edge of our Purple Line infrastructure. Our Opportunity Zones workshop and the promotion we're doing on Opportunity Zones is still driving a lot of interest in Montgomery County. We understand one of the very first deals is going to be taking place in the Twin Brook region to leverage the Opportunity Zones tax credits for investors, so we're very excited about that. On a cautionary tale, we have discovery that more and more companies are looking for urban-rich environments, amenity-rich, walkable environments specific to the life sciences areas. We're seeing more interest in areas that have a full ecosystem of opportunity. So we're excited to see that there's projects in Bethesda's in that regard, but we have to think about what we have on the suburban life sciences front and office front and be able to sell that just as compelling as what will be future trends where people want to be closer to urban environments. We share your concern, as we talked earlier this spring and throughout the tenure of the EDC, that there just isn't enough growth on the new business starts, both in the establishment growth number as well as the sole proprietorship number. And we'll be talking about those two indicators later, watching these indicators to make sure that they are trending upward, because we share that same concern, and we've heard you loud and clear that we need to start driving job creation and capital investment creation in the county. Our employment numbers are modestly growing, and we also have continued challenges we hear from the business community on income inequality, workforce housing, access to capital for historically underutilized or underrepresented business owners. So that's kind of setting the stage. Wow, this is that's small type. Who brought out their magnifying glass here? I think I can see it. Hopefully you guys can see it in front of you.
Yeah, we can see it. We got
and if anyone
displays.
Watching on TV wants to have this.
This may be showing on the screen.
Good. So what I wanted to illustrate in this slide is that Montgomery County EDC is one of many partners that works within an economic development ecosystem. Much like you guys spoke to this morning on workforce development, economic development is a very holistic, very ecosystem-driven endeavor. We're very great at initiating work, doing the work, self-producing the strategic initiatives and the marketing and the business development, but we also leverage and amplify many of our partners in the areas that you have listed in these columns. And I won't go through every column or partner, but know that I think the thing that we've done, not the very best, but certainly some of the very best, is our ability to be a connective tissue between the many partners within Montgomery County, the state, and the region. And I think that we're interacting with the business community better than ever in economic development. I think that's our true strength. It's our initial challenge, but now our true strength is that we're connecting very well with the business community and with our partners to execute our mission and vision.
So wait, you created this display so that we can kind of see the big picture here as well as where you fit into that picture?
Yeah, you can see the big picture, and there's be times that you're going to see our team taking the lead on endeavors, and there's be times that we're going to support someone else's endeavor. So we may not take the lead on the affordable workforce housing conversation, but we're going to recognize what's being done in the ecosystem and fuel the efforts of those that are being successful. Same on talent. Certainly we didn't begin as a talent pipeline company, but we recognize there's some gaps in our talent pipeline development ecosystem. So we're going to work with our partners to fill those gaps and address where there are some opportunities.
And you're not listed on this chart.
We are above. We are all encompassing on the top bar.
I see. Okay.
And don't fault us if you can for the graphics.
One group to bind them. I see.
I suppose we could have put MCEDC in all these, but we hope that we are the convener of this universe of partners.
Got it. You work through all these different sectors and verticals.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. And I think we've got strong connective tissue between these groups. And there's times that we may not be the answer. We talked about this at the last council meeting, that there might be an inquiry from a certain type of business that we wouldn't necessarily provide direct support to, but we know the partners that we transition them to make sure that they get the services they need.
But these are the initiative areas.
Yes, yes.
Got it.
Well, those are the areas that drive economic development.
Right.
Yeah, you've talked about this, I think at our last FED meeting when we were in the room right behind us, that it really is a holistic endeavor. It has to be planning, it has to be permitting, it has to be housing, transportation. It's not just my team marketing and doing deals.
Exactly.
But all of us creating a value
We've all
proposition.
got to be pulling an oar.
Yeah, absolutely. So our strategic plan of action is going through a refinement for FY20. As you know, we've begun 2.5 years ago. Very happy with the strategic plan that we've been working from. These are long-term initiatives that many will continue. I'll share those with you, and then we'll be bringing in some new tactics. We'll be presenting this to our board of directors on May 13th for their approval. We've gotten the feedback of county council, from our county executive's office, from the business community, our board of directors, to create what I think is a very relevant strategic plan. As I've said before, and I apologize if it's becoming too much of an echo, but this was really created by understanding what the business community needed to be successful, and not creating a void to what our staff thought was appropriate, but what we've heard from the business community and from our partners in council, in the county executive's office, and our business community. So we're still amplifying our work in recruitment and expansion. We heard loud and clear that we need to create more companies, bring more companies here, expand those companies that are in Montgomery County. We're doing a very aggressive business development outreach plan through conferences and trade shows. We've hired a team member to help facilitate the execution of recruitment. We're looking at industry-specific infrastructure. Many of these endeavors we've talked to county council about in the past, but we do have a void of wet lab space. I think we're currently at 2 or 3% unoccupied wet lab space, so we can't go out and sell the product and tell people to come here if there's not a space for them to move into. So one of our initiatives is to expand our inventory by 75,000 square feet on wet lab space, and we're looking at that through BioLab pilot project and incentive project to do so. We're working through with a company to understand what the appetite is for a co-packing facility. We've got a lot of entrepreneurs in the food space that want to take their food business to the next level, but they're having a hard time finding the production space to take their salad dressing from 100 bottles to, I think she said 120,000 bottles a run. So we're looking at a possible co-packing facility for Montgomery County. We've had a conversation with our partners at the county and with council on a small-scale manufacturing site, understand the ecosystem to see what we can do there as well to help that entrepreneur and that small manufacturer grow. We're looking at sites, whether it's land, county-owned land, or county procurement opportunities for us to have companies test their product or their service within the county. Again, being creative in infrastructure. Commercializing federal technology will always be work that we do. Engaging young CEOs to be part of the legislative process is part of our endeavor. Leveraging opportunity zones, and always marketing Montgomery County. And on the marketing Montgomery County, we recognize we need to share more about the success of the EDC and what's happening locally, but we're also looking to market within markets outside of the region, Boston, perhaps Philadelphia, other life sciences markets, to attract a company to come here for the first time. I think I have half of this slide and one more slide to go. On our new tactics, we're evolving to focus on women and entrepreneurs of color in our outreach plan. In addition to our original 5 stakeholder industries, we are looking to bring hospitality back into a stakeholder industry. We think there's an opportunity, and there's always been an opportunity there, but we're going to forcefully focus on that. We want to work with the county executive's office as well as this team to be part of the conversation on our incubators and recognize that it's not just about the physical incubators, but really looking at the entire innovation ecosystem from capital to mentors to capital, and then also those physical spaces. So we want to be part of that conversation with the county executives team. We're developing an idea on talent. I think this morning's conversation really brought to the forefront that we need to be forceful on what we're doing on not only placing that worker, but making sure that we have a talent pipeline that's going to retain the workforce and bring new workers here to our county. We've talked about a statistic that there's 30,000 open jobs in Montgomery County, roughly, whether it's 28 or 32. A lot of those are technology and primary jobs, and the EDC wants to take a role in what
Good.
that looks like. So we're in the very early conversations with Ellie and her team. Our chairman are talking about maybe some innovative ways to incentivize companies to retain and attract new talent here, and that'll be coming to you within the coming months. So trying to
Yeah,
be
we had a
different and
great
bold.
discussion. When the first committee meeting of the year was on the tech talent pipeline, and I'm really excited to hear that is you're thinking about the issues in the same way. I think we can really, we're going to get there a lot faster with the support from the EDC. So thank you for being engaged, and keep
Absolutely.
going.
Thank you. And the final bullet, this has been on our plan since day one, is how do we get more companies in Montgomery County to do business with each other? And that could be anywhere from the groups that Jeremy represents, our ag producers that are producing for our restaurants, to cybersecurity technologies being purchased by our large employers, and everything in between. How do we keep more of the business within Montgomery County? Not only government procurement, but just how do we make more introductions to companies to do business with each other? I think we have one more. So you're successful on the things that you measure, and we've heard loud and clear from the last meeting that we had with you that we need to be very strategic and smart and accountable to what we're accomplishing. We've been working with Dave Gottsman at County Stat, as well as Jerome, and with Gene, the team at the County Executive's Office, as well as this group, to make sure that we're constantly showing what our progress looks like as an economic indicator, and then we're defining very clear metrics to judge the performance of economic development related projects that we are a part of. I won't list all of these, but really for the first time, you're going to see a much more in-depth analysis of where Montgomery County is tracking in key areas that we can be affected by, that we can look at our strategic plan and understand if we're driving the strategies that are going to make a difference for our county. Our performance metrics are going to be approved by our board of directors, and certainly want to have a conversation with county council and county executive's office to make sure that we're in alignment there. We're having that conversation on Friday with Jerome and with Andrew Klein to make sure that all of these expectations are aligned. I think Councilmember Friedson, you spoke to this not only in our last meeting, but a subsequent follow-up with workforce, that we just need to make sure that we're all answering the right question, that it's not so much sometimes the intention is malicious or wrong. It's just sometimes we're not working from the same expectation. And I think this exercise will make sure that our expectations are clear among us.
All right.
And one more. Okay, final one. So we are pleased with the county grant appropriation of $5 million. Working with our private fundraising consultant, we intend to raise $350,000 in FY20. We have a degree of interest income that will be shared, used for personnel. We currently are at 19 team members. We hope to grow the team, including a few additional business development team members, to 22.5 full-time employees at $3.2 million, which is salaries and benefits. That number we feel is appropriate to the industry. We've done studies with our partner at Nonprofit HR to benchmark where other nonprofit groups like us fall, and we feel comfortable that we're within reasonable competitive bandwidth there and being appropriate to taxpayer money. The remainder of that budget will be used toward our marketing media costs, our business development efforts, and strategic initiatives. One other quick note on our personnel number. We self-produce a lot of our work in-house. Unlike having a junior EDC team that just outsources everything, we produce a lot of our strategic initiatives in-house. I've built an in-house ad agency within the EDC, so we don't contract out and have a higher dollar amount in our business development marketing strategic initiatives because we're self-producing much of our product. We'll have operating expenses of $703,000. Our expenses are higher than our anticipated. We'll be using part of our rollover funding to cover that deficit. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Good. Why don't we go into the packet? Andrew, okay, let's go to the packet. Gene.
Sure. So as staff noted, the council will appropriate a line item for this. The board will approve a budget based on the MCDC staff recommendation. And so staff is noting items in the budget, and the council can speak to them. And beyond that, it's unless they make their desire known otherwise, these are just expenditure issues that council staff believes is important to understand as we get into the EDC's budget. So Mr. Petter mentioned kind of two items here, the first two items here, both staff mixture and staffing cost. We've looked at this organization for 3 years, and council staff just wishes to note, I mean, the growing expenditures for personnel is starting to creep out more of the budget for other special projects, as well as the staff mixture. I mean, we talked a lot during the March meeting about recruitment for businesses and expansion, and it appears, I guess, at least on position title, that the EDC has got a lot more internal focus than, say, external focus just on position title, and that's why they're hiring more business development staff. And so, again, the staff is bringing this up as a discussion item just to how the EDC is going to position itself with the appropriation from the council to not only recruit businesses and grow that pipeline, but also continue to grow special projects like we heard regarding the wet lab space, the co-packing facility, because those are also great economic initiatives in the county to better businesses.
All right, so you're asking the question of, are we staffed up to be out there talking to businesses sufficiently? Right, Gene?
Correct.
We have a strong marketing entity. Do we have enough personnel devoted to getting out there in the, sitting down one-on-one with business owners? Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, I think Montgomery County and our EDC is unique in that we're a hybrid economic development company. We're fairly, I wouldn't say untraditional, but I think we're smart and strategic in the sense that we're not just about the deals. We're not just about retaining companies, expanding companies, and recruiting companies, and just boots on the ground. Although we have, I think, 2/3 of our staff do that role. The reality is that we have to do some long-term table setting product improvement before we go out there and start meeting with companies. So the case of the wet lab is a great example. I'd love to have 10 people out there promoting to come to Montgomery County to move into wet lab space, but in reality it doesn't exist for them to move into. So I hire team members to help me create that capacity. Same thing on capital. So I would love to have 10 business development people to say, this is the best place to start a business, and we've got free money essentially for you to start your business. But in reality, we don't have access to capital as easy as we want. So we have some infrastructure building team members to build the capacity on capital. Same thing on connections, same thing on marketing. So I think there is truth to the statement that all of our team isn't out beating the pavement. But in reality, I would think 2/3 of our team play that role, including all of our senior business development team. But I want to get our product as strong as it can be, whether that's transportation, whether that's housing, whether that's capital, whether that's a mentor, whether it's translating technology out of a federal lab into a new company. And those things aren't a traditional deal business development role, but I believe they're setting the table for success in Montgomery County, and it's what we've heard from our business community for what they need to be successful. But if you want to know kind of culture at the organization, our team is hungry. Our team is hungry to produce results. This is a challenging environment to do business at times, especially on the recruitment side when we're competing nationally. So we're very, very, very active to sell the Montgomery County value proposition in those stakeholder industries. I wouldn't change the way we're built at all. We have a few open positions on business development, but I believe we need to get our product and infrastructure in line before we do much more aggressive outreach.
You have a few open positions on business development. Does that mean that
Yes,
you're
we're
trying
gonna-
to fill them, or you're holding them?
I don't know if we've got the jobs posted yet, but in FY20 we have slated positions for 2 business development specialists, which are mid-level to junior level business development team members.
Okay, let's go to questions. Andrew, followed by Will.
Well, first of all, Mr. Petter, thank you for being here and for your service, and the news that you're going to be departing. Sorry to see you go, and not just leave the EDC, but leaving the community for family reasons. But I did want to personally thank you for all the work that you've done and the work that you've put into trying to build this new organization. And it's come with challenges, of course, like any new organizations, but I do appreciate all the work that you have done, and I think it's a good opportunity, while sad to see you go, to kind of take a step back and think about where we've come with this organization, what it has been built into, and how do we move forward? What are the things that have worked? What are the things that haven't worked? And how the board can move forward, and how the on the executive side and the council side, how we can provide the partnership that is needed in order to take this to the next level. And so I think having you as part of that conversation, as long as you're able, and as long as you're here, and hopefully just a phone call away, to help in those conversations, given the expertise that you now have, and I think the perspective that you will bring, I think will be incredibly helpful to us at what I consider to be a critical moment for not only the organization itself, but for the county's economic development future.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Friedson. I did a little back of the envelope just because I'm also doing a little bit of looking back as I'm looking forward to the next 4 months of impact here that I'll provide to the EDC in Montgomery County, and my team will cringe because we're always trying to make sure our numbers are accurate, but roughly 94 projects have been won or closed since January 2017. 3,500 new jobs have been created, 6,700 jobs retained, $532 million in capital investment has been added to the tax rolls in Montgomery County, and 2.4 million square feet of new commercial spaces has been absorbed. So certainly we haven't done everything that we could have done, but we are certainly moving in the right direction. You have a wonderful team, not only on the senior leadership team, but throughout the team, have strengthened our team. The board of directors is incredibly strong. I think the relationship we have now with county council is much more healthy and collaborative than it's ever been. I'm confident the county executive's office is going to continue to be a strong partner of ours. So me leaving will be a blip on the radar, although I will always be an ally to Montgomery County, and my bat line will always be on for you. You're in good hands with the EDC.
I'm not sure who lights up the bat signal, but we'll have to get back to you on that. But no, I appreciate that, and I do think it is a good time to look back and look forward simultaneously and figure out where we go. I was going to ask you about whether or not the staffing is situated currently for your strategic goals as an organization. I think you've already answered that. But I did want to ask specifically about the contract piece, and this might be a staff question, but I am kind of interested. We've been having this kind of broad conversation that we had some of earlier this morning, and I know you were there, Mr. Petter, with WorkSource Montgomery, but similar organizations in terms of we're part of county government now, or outside of county government, and I think everybody is still figuring out what everyone else's role is and who is responsible for what. And I think part of the challenge has been projected onto the organizations exclusively, but I think some of it is shared by all of us, of really getting a firm grasp of who does what, who's responsible for what, who's accountable to what, and how we assess what is, so to speak. And I think in this case, with the contract, can we talk a little bit about how that works, what role the council, has in terms of, where these strategic, because my presumption is there's a performance-based metric aspect, as you mentioned earlier, which is a board function, but then there's also a contract that's being established. We appropriate the money, the executive is establishing. I appreciate, Mr. Fletcher, you joining, but how we set those goals, are those the same goals that the board is setting that are part of that contract? What, if any, role the council has in the establishment of that contract, and do we see that contract? Do we approve that contract? And do we assess the outcomes based off of that contract?
Hello. A lot of good questions. At the threat of sounding repetitive from this morning, it's almost the exact same thing. The executive office wants to make sure that you are aware. We have already explained to my colleagues to the right that we do want to be held more accountable and in sync with what they're doing, what our goals are, and what your vision is exactly. So at this current point in time, we've had one conversation, which will lead to more conversations regarding the fiscal year 20 metrics and outcomes. Same thing with Workforce Montgomery. We're going to outline, define those, agree upon those, and then make sure that they are shared with your office. You did see a version of them today, and this is the point where we are now trying to figure out with the contract for fiscal year 20 how to make everything be in more and better alignment. As with Workforce Montgomery, in my opinion and the opinion of my office, EDC is not alone. They are supported by the executive and his team. We are here. We're going to make sure that we report back to this council on a regular basis so there is better communication and a great understanding of where we are all trying to go. We share your same opinion. We hate to see Mr. Petter leave, but at this point in time, we want to make sure that we support the agency the best way we can.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the comment about alignment, because I think that is one of the issues that we have. And it's not just between the executive branch and the council and the organization in either case. I think it's also the fact that even within workforce development and that pipeline, or in this case, economic development, we have all of these different enterprises. We kept the incubators. We have, a new business program, small business program that we're trying to do. We have business loan programs that are still part of the county, and yet we have the EDC also. And I don't think we've done a very good job, quite honestly, in sitting down with one broad, overarching strategy and then figuring out how each player on the team, works together to try to, win the game. And hopefully we can do that better with a lot more intentionality now. I think I said before that I feel like we're sending a lot of different ships out to sea in economic development without intentionality of where we're sending them. And everybody might be doing good work individually, but if we don't start out in the same place and talk about ending up in a particular place, then how do we know how far we've gotten and whether or not we're getting to the destination? And so I'm hopeful that that could be a key focus, and I think your role specifically could be a key piece of that. I know Ms. Benjamin is back there, who does a terrific job, and I appreciate that as well.
And thank you. And yes, you will see the common element of, and we are doing that exact thing that you mentioned, by the way. We want to make sure that economic development is centralized and inclusive. There are a lot of various little satellite pieces that remained and occurred when DED dissolved, and we got the incubator. I mean, all of it is and should be under one umbrella and one plan. And I am going to try to be the consistent piece in all of it and make sure that we do communicate and we keep everyone and all of our stakeholders involved in the process. But yes, we are working on that exact same thing.
I appreciate it. And if it's, I'm new here, but if it's appropriate, I think it would be helpful once the contract is ratified, and I think this should be a regular process. I think the PHED committee should review it, so we are aware, and if it needs to be in a closed session, I think that's fine, but I think it would be helpful for us to review the contract so that we are on the same page as the executive branch and as the EDC, so that when future briefings occur, everybody is reading off the same sheet of music, and then we can assess whether somebody is off key, because currently it seems to me every time we get together for some of these briefings, everybody has a different idea of what success looks like.
Correct.
And 75 companies and X number of jobs, and to some person that is good, and to another person that is not good enough. And having that contract, I think, as the base point, providing feedback based off of that, I think would be really helpful, at least to me, to really understand what is it we're trying to do here, and then assessing, are we doing what we said we were going to do with the taxpayer dollars that we're spending for this critical work? I mean, if we don't grow the economy, everything else we do is at risk.
Absolutely. And in the past, you may have met with these organizations about these issues or subjects quarterly. We do want to make sure that we get you some information on a more frequent basis. I would say based on where they all sit, we need to communicate with you and your colleagues at least monthly. The contract itself is probably the first example of something that we need to meet and discuss in the very near future. We have 8 weeks into the end of this fiscal year, so we need to get on it with the contract and the agreed upon metrics and make sure that the vision and the outcomes are agreed upon everyone who we discussed. And so I can save the conversation for my colleagues later. The incubator will be included in that process as well.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to getting on it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Juando, and then I've got something to add as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and want to associate myself with Mr. Friedson's comments as you walk away, Mr. Fletcher, and just say thank you for, I know you're not leaving, but thank you for all those updates. I think it's critically important, and we actually been afforded a unique opportunity with the various transitions and the council and the executive, and Mr. Petter, we're gonna miss you, but with you're leaving and just I think it's a unique time. Obviously, new staff to do all this and have a new relationship and a new way to look at it. So I would agree that with Mr. Friedson that would be a great outcome, and look forward to the monthly updates. Great to see the whole team. I had just a couple questions. Going back to the staffing, it seemed like you were saying you think you're right-sized at 22.5. The council staff had brought up, and hopefully you saw the chart in the packet that compared to people we often benchmark ourselves against in Fairfax and Arlington, who are have a larger budget, but also and obviously more people dedicated to staff, but that also they are paying slightly less than we are, and so the question was raised: do you think the compensation levels are at a point where, at the right level, that wouldn't allow us to maybe get a couple of extra hires? I think you've kind of answered this, but I just want to let you specifically answer it.
Yeah, I think we've gotten smarter with our compensation levels as we've evolved as an organization, and we hired nonprofit HR to do that study between other nonprofits of our size. It's important to note that Arlington's makeup is not all economic development. It's also a government-run organization, as well as Fairfax is a government-run organization. Not saying that a public-private partnership should be compensated at any additional level, but I'm comfortable with the work the nonprofit HR did to look at a broader set of peers, not just the peers in our marketplace, to recognize that we can be competitive at the salaries we're offering, but we're not excessive. I believe we're at 92% of a percentile that we think we need to fall between 85% and 115%. Stacy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there any additional clarity on that? Are you good?
That's correct. So essentially, all of our salaries in the aggregate are at 92%. So in terms of how our employees are spread, 92% of the market. Okay. So 100% of the comparable in this region, okay, against other organizations that are comparable in terms of size and budget. Okay. So again, going back to the 92%, 100% would essentially say that all of our salaries are exactly at the average midpoint for each position. Right. So again, we looked at each position and assigned each employee a compa ratio, and we determined that overall in the aggregate, all salaries were at 92%.
Okay. And just on timeline, speaking of staffing, I'm trying to organize I have two more questions. You're leaving in 4 months, David, and then what's the timeline for a search and replacement?
Yeah, our board of directors has already pulled together a search committee, and they've talked about the approach to find an executive search firm. They've formulated an RFP. They've sent out the RFP to 13 search firms, as well as posted it publicly. I believe the due date back for that is 2 weeks? May 3rd on response from search firms. They want to have an executive in place in September, so it's hopeful that there's some overlap between myself and the new leader, but our board is taking it very seriously. They don't want this to go on forever, and they realize they need to be urgent. And I'm pleased with the speed that they're taking on this.
Great. And Gene, you're monitoring that, I'm assuming.
Sure, I am. I also note that...
Or you will be.
Well, I will be. I'll also note that the executive has 5 board positions he'll need to consider this year, 2 vacants, 3 that are re-up, and so the board makeup may or may not change, which will be a part of this process as the CEO comes in, so that's just something for the council to be aware of, because it'll have to review those appointments.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more question here. So you mentioned 2 things, Dave. You said work to build the value proposition. You said you kind of 2 tracks. You haven't been able to put all your resources into business development. This is, if I'm paraphrasing what you said earlier, because you've had to build and kind of do some groundwork. Talk to me about, explain that a little bit, but in the context of these new tactics that you're rolling out. Where did those come from? I mean, obviously, not to, and I don't mean this jokingly or disparagingly, but focusing on women and people of color entrepreneurs doesn't seem like that's not a new tactic. I mean, I think that's something we should have been doing.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just I'm trying to what informed that list and.
Can you go to that slide? Let's
Yeah.
put that slide back
And
up.
actually, what's not on that slide is an area that I'd love to have Sarah Miller, our VP of Strategy, speak to. And she's like, oh, no, putting me on the spot. But part of the strength of our senior team is that our strategic initiatives are very smart, and it's beyond what were some subtle tweaks. I'll let Sarah speak to the development
just wanna
of
know
our
what's kind of
strategic
behind
plan. You might speak to the BioLab pilot project and some of the infrastructure work. Very proud of her work, as well as the entire strategic initiatives team.
Did you say something before?
No, I just was and you can answer the question I was asking about the tactics. How did you develop these
In
and
terms of the new tactics?
yeah, and why as opposed to what changed? Like, why is it just we didn't have the resources, or you found there was some research that you saw that said we need to do more of it? I'm just trying to.
Well, I think that
How did we
part
get
of
here?
This, we have evolved over the last 3 years, and so as we evolve, as David said, it does become clear, and I think it's not just something that the businesses tell us, but it's things that DED before and everyone knew that there were certain. I'm going to use the word deficits, but I don't mean it in a negative way necessarily, but there are challenges that our local economy has, and there are opportunities for us to fix it. And so when he says he's kind of bolstering the value proposition of the county, it's not necessarily a negative thing. I think any county in any jurisdiction always needs to take a look at what they need to do to improve the conditions for economic growth. And so each year as we grew the past 3 years and we learned more from businesses and we started to incorporate more data-driven approaches to looking at recruitment and expansion and things of that nature, it became clear that we needed to focus on specific things. So you are correct that focusing on women and entrepreneurs of color is something everyone should have been doing for a long time. And when you see it's like 2% of VC money goes to women and entrepreneurs of color, it's something that everyone
and we have a lot of those groups here in our
we
in
certainly
our
do.
county,
Yes, we
obviously,
do.
so.
And so we are probably late for sure in doing this, but as we develop our entrepreneurship strategy more fully, we just want to say publicly that that's something that we're going to be concentrating on.
And are there programs or things that I'm assuming you're in the formulation stage because this is going to be approved by your board and then you'll.
We are, and fortunately in the DMV, we do have a lot of folks here who are socially minded and have money and want to do the right things. And so when you think about Hera Hub in DC and some of the other people that are looking particularly at women entrepreneurs, we do not lack the desire here or the people who are able to build these networks. They just need some more support. And so as we develop this, again, more fully, we will be looking to those partners to see what we can do to help them. I think that in terms of, did that answer your question?
No,
kind of, it's evolving. So I just want to say we're focusing on it.
It's a good,
And we're evolving. In terms of thinking about some of the other newer tactics for the FY20, looking at hospitality, for example, you'll hear probably later about the kitchen incubator program and the training facility that the county executive is promoting. We too have been working with Visit Montgomery on a couple of new ideas. And I don't, if Kelly, can I talk about it? Okay. So we have talked about a hospitality/tourism incubator or accelerator. And I know we're talking a lot about incubators and different
Breaking
pieces
news
today, and it makes everybody nervous. But so there is a really, we think, exciting opportunity to think about tourism and tech. And again, it's like the social impact piece. We have all of these pieces, whether it's health or whether it's social impact or hospitality, and bringing this kind of tech underpinning is something that you'll see a lot more of as we evolve over the next couple of years. But we're excited to talk about that with Visit Montgomery. Also, thinking about, I mean, we've talked about the incubator piece, and the business-to-business pilot project is something that we've struggled with this a little bit because it is very difficult. And whether you're talking about, as David said, talking about kale to cyber, there does seem to be some kind of logistical challenges for getting the willing buyers and the willing sellers together. And it's not just as simple. MoCo Made is a great start to that, and we've been working with the Food Council and Visit Montgomery as well to promote that, but it's not quite enough. And so what we really want to do is we want to take a look at some of the larger and medium-sized enterprises, and this has really just been a function of us not having enough people, but now we do, to really dedicate to this. And the reason we're calling it as a pilot is because we really want to have a better understanding of within our local supply chain, kind of where some of the bottlenecks are.
Sure.
And then come back to you, and it could be that we say, you know what, maybe it's just too hard in some circumstances, or maybe it's just capacity building in another circumstance, or maybe it's just getting a business to have a refrigerated truck. Like, I don't know what it is yet, but we think that now we have enough capacity internally in the staff and enough time to take the time necessary to figure out more about the business to business. Do you want more?
No, that's helpful. I think that's
Okay.
helpful. So more to come, and thank you for fleshing those out a little bit. I think as we have these more frequent updates, we can dig in and see what you're finding out. And I think a lot of these areas, whether it's the talent pipeline or B2B or all of these, we all have various interests. There's all these various programs that are out there, and so that's helpful.
I do think even though it seemed a little crazy, the one slide with MCEDC and then all of the pieces, it is helpful, though, I think, again, to think about when you're looking at kind of the overall economic indicators that we all should be tracking, and then thinking about those columns as what needs to happen to have a healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem and just economy in general. You can kind of refer to that often because there are many, many partners. And so I think this begins to kind of consolidate and explain how our local economy works.
Got it. All right, thank you.
If I could follow up real quickly, as you were speaking, Councilmember Friedsen's been wonderful to participate on our board of directors. Gene's been part of many board meetings, probably more than he cares to admit, as well as Jerome and Tina attend our board meetings as well. On May 13th, we'll be going over our strategic plan of action in further detail. I'll probably spend an hour going through it, and you're welcome to attend that as well. It's open to the public, and we'd love to have your interaction there.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Terrific. Back to the strategic initiative slide. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your support in working on this idea of a business advisory group. We have that scheduled, right, Gene? Pin that down?
No, it's not on the schedule. We're working through the process to have MCDC work to build one, and waiting to hear back regarding that.
I think
We have a tentative date hold, but I believe we're still on your team to verify that date was good for you. So we'll circle back.
Okay.
That we're fine. But we do have a placeholder date in June.
Right. I think we have a placeholder date in June. I think it's good to go.
Yeah, okay. I'll follow up with you and we'll get that going.
So you're going to identify a number of business leaders to come in, and we're going to have a dialogue about strategic framework for economic development.
Yeah, I think it adds one more opportunity to have more connective tissue between the business community and our elected officials. And coming into
It is
today,
a committee thing, so I can include my colleagues in it. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I
I think
you
that's
would
where our
appreciate that.
strengths have been, and that's where our challenges have been. Our strengths have been when we have the business community at the table, part of our strategic planning, part of vetting our programs, making those introductions, being mentors, providing us access to capital solutions. That's when we get really, really strong at the EDC. We need more of that, and I think this is going to be another step in the right direction.
So I'm really looking forward to that. I just want to reiterate my philosophy of let's be in constant dialogue and then pull out ideas and then build those ideas and then set them into motion. I think that's
agree.
the way this can work.
Yep.
And I'd like it to work that way. So I think we ought to schedule a series of look at the PHED schedule and see when we can add in little updates on, the creating industry infrastructure. We can find out if there's a piece there that we can help move forward, or, there's some county departments that we can help bring to the table for some conversation. As far as the, same thing with the federal tech, and then the new tactics, I think most of those would lend themselves well. We've started to dive into the talent pipeline, but we're going to want we're going to want to return to that soon, I think, to get a sense of how you can help us build it. But I think all of those could use, a focused conversation, and we might as well do it at committee, save time. So let's just, Jean, if you could please remind me, and we'll follow up, and we'll look at that, and we'll look at the Fed schedule, and Teddy is here, and we'll try to figure out how to work some of that in. And I hear you're looking at White Flint.
We're looking at strategic areas of the county, both White Flint and White Oak, as areas of priority to better understand like a micro marketing and business development strategy, as well as what needs to come to be to bring that to life. Councilmember Friedson and yourself joined us for a conversation. There are many partners in the White Flint conversation as well as White Oak conversation, much like that confusing slide of all of our partners.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want, we keep mispronouncing the Pike District.
The Pike District and
So
Wheaton.
we keep pronouncing it wrong.
The
so.
Pike District and Wheaton are going to be areas of focus for us to bring to life. So yes, we're excited about that.
All right.
The Pike District.
Okay. Good. Let's keep going, or I guess that sort of talks through a lot of the budget initiatives.
Correct.
But yeah, let me just say one more time, because you, Mr. Duano, you asked if that was, if this was going to be a committee thing. Yeah, this is a committee thing. This is so that we can all be part of the same conversation with business leaders, and we can have a creative process here together and an assessment process here together. I don't think it does as much good if I create an advisory group and then I go out. Then it's not going to translate. Like let's work together here as a team and figure out how we can move things, through this council.
Well, I appreciate you putting the ED in Fed, so thank you. I think that's a core part of what we do, so I'm glad that we're doing it as a committee. I think that's one of the reasons why this committee is established to focus on these issues.
Amen. Okay. Thank you. All right, I hope you'll hang around for the rest of the conversation, as it's all in your wheelhouse. So we'll move on to the Economic Development Fund. I think we approved that without objection. You approved the EDC's budget without objection.
Correct.
Great. So we've got Mike Covey, Robert Hagedorn, Lori Boyer, and Puffin Salem. Do I pronounce your name correctly? Is it Salem or Salem? Salem. Thank you. All right. So, Gene,
Sure. We have the Economic Development Fund. Executive is recommending $5,479,613, which is an increase of $937,834 from fiscal 19. The EDF is a non-lapsing continuous fund that is our, for lack of a better word, a business incentive programs. We have a lot of sub-programs on top of the discretionary programs for the executive when doing deal closing projects such as Marriott's, headquarters, et cetera. For the sake of time, staff is just going to jump in through the various sub-programs. The page 2 table at the bottom summarizes the appropriations as recommended by the executive, because there's a lot that gets plugged into the Economic Development Fund that is not discretionary. There's very little undesignated balance, so it's important to see how much is going into the fund that is going to be used this year.
sorry, Gene, would you say
No
that
problem.
again? We were discussing timing and scheduling, so.
Page 2 has all the information you need about what the executive plans to appropriate in this fund as recommended. And the only thing to note is there's a very small amount, $325,717 of the total appropriation that's undesignated. The rest of it gets designated as detailed on that page. So I'll just go ahead and jump into the programs and staff questions/issues. The first one's the Economic Development Fund Grant and Loan Program. This is our largest sub-program of the EDF. It's the discretionary program for, again, many of the deal closing projects. There's only a couple issues related to this sub-program. I should also note this also contains the personnel costs and operating costs, which are pretty minimal for the EDF. So one of the issues is we have an ongoing agreement with Bike Grid, and each year we continue to appropriate $120,238. But averaging out all of the annual disbursements, we're averaging around 63,000. So staff just recommends, and again, it's a minor reduction, but a reduction of $39,258 to appropriate the amount they will need to pay for that agreement. It doesn't impact the agreement negatively. It's just getting the number close to what we really need.
All right, sounds fine.
So, and then the second item in this is that the executive is recommending an appropriation of $167,000 for a mesoscale diagnostics. This was a long-term deal, and we've already made our three-year disbursements for this, and we're waiting for some additional information. And staff understands that there will be an amendment forthcoming. Minus the amendment, this appropriation may or may not need to be used in fiscal 20. Given that the executive wants to plug it in, staff thought it'd be prudent to remain, but until the council sees an amendment from the executive regarding this agreement, it'll just sit there until they need it.
So you're not recommending that we don't approve the funds, actually, even though your packet seems to say that, or
My
what?
packet recommends that we do not do anything until we get an amendment, so we will appropriate $167,000 in the EDF, but they will not be able to spend it until we get the amendment.
Okay. All right, so, the question I was getting, talk to me about renegotiating the agreement, what's going on there?
So, Laurie Boyer, I'm the Economic Development Manager in the Department of Finance. There were some, as we were talking with the company, and we actually reviewed the EDF agreement as it was approved, we realized there were actually some discrepancies in the agreement itself as it was signed in FY14 about the interpretation of how and when an incentive would be available. The incentive was available, it was set up as a two-phase appropriation, so the first phase payments, which they've already received, didn't rely on any change in assessed value or anything like that. Phase 2 talks about a change in assessed value and some other items, and the wording is actually unclear in how that's Phase 2 incentive would be paid out to the firm. So we are working with the Office of the County Attorney to clarify that language, and we'll certainly bring you any recommended amendment to that agreement before we would make any additional disbursements. But that would be our plan, is to come back to you in a closed session with those recommended amendments as we get the language clarified so that everyone's on the same page with how the incentive would be dispersed.
Do you think it's likely to go up or down?
No, it would definitely not go up. The 167 would be, per the agreement, would be the maximum allowable amount. So my guess is it will probably be less than that. But the 167 is the maximum annual amount, so it would definitely not go beyond that.
All right. Question, Mr. Friedson?
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with the reduction of the 39,258 based on staff and if colleagues are. Did want to ask about the 325,717 of undesignated funds. What do we use that money for? And
Where is that in the?
that's on page 2.
Does that come up in the course of the memo, Gene, or?
It does. I briefly speak about it.
He just mentioned it, so that's why I brought it.
Yeah.
Well, that was sort of as an overview, I think.
Sorry.
Given the conversation about mesoscale, can we finish that real quick?
Sure. Sorry.
No, that's no problem.
So, all right, so once again, so we're saying that the funds can't be provided until that's all you're saying? Is it
Correct.
consistent with our practice?
Consistent with the practice. The
If there's
council
a
could
different deal,
certainly-
then you got to come back, but we're not zeroing out funding.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No problems. Okay.
Moving on.
Addressing Mr. Friedson's question, it's at the top of page 4. Staff briefly talks about the undesignated balance. It's
Okay.
averaged around actually closer to 750,000 previous years. This year it only has 325,000. These can be used for anything that the EDF allows based on the executive's prerogative. So for any deals in the Economic Development Fund that are less than 100,000, the executive can make a determination to provide that money without bringing it before council. So it could be used for those deals. Certainly could be used for other programs such as MOVE if the appropriation runs out for what's in there for fiscal 20. Again, it would be under the prerogative of the executive without any
Those
additional.
under $100,000 deals that wouldn't have to come to the council, those don't go through wouldn't go through the EDF GLP?
It would.
So then why, I'm just confused why the 325, 717 isn't in that fund. I mean, to me, that's a fund that's there to give out loans.
It is.
When they're over 100,000, you have to come back to us. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense is why we wouldn't designate it for a particular
Well, it is in
account.
that fund, but it's undesignated because we don't know yet what deals we'll be getting from MCEDC to say we would like to, this company should receive an incentive from the county. We want to work together to put, so it's just undesignated to the
designated within
specific
that fund.
That is correct.
Oh, okay, that
That's
wasn't
right.
clear. Thank you.
Because the fund is non-lapsing, so
The
that's
answer
part
is, of
the-
course,
there
it
you
wouldn't be that way because
Right.
it isn't that way.
Exactly.
And I'm learning. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right, there were no other issues related to the EDF.
Yeah, pausing.
Just one thing, it's just a note for staff and for the chair, on the process of requesting and distributing and approving said funds, that I'd love to have like a conversation at some point on how that all goes and is it going the right way, and maybe again, I'm new here too, but had a little experience with this as far as when you're engaged by either EDC or the executive's prerogative, or you get I guess those are the two places it's going to come from primarily. I just would love to talk a little more, maybe in the summer or at some point, and work it into an agenda about how that works.
How
and-
the incentive
yeah,
process
how the incentive
works.
process works, and is it working well?
Yeah, we're actually happy to come in and do that. One of staff's recommendations is for us to come in the fall and do an overview of all the economic development programs that the county has and how they work, and we're happy to come in and have that conversation with you, talk about process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be helpful. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the year. We're keeping our eyes on this. I think that we want to see continued progress and continued deals. In any event, we can do we can come back and we can make sure we address how that whole process works. It's also, anyway, it's all right. We're gonna have to continue the conversation offline probably a little bit, and then maybe see what you're interested in. Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I was going to mention that I think staff's recommendation is great. I think adding that as part of the conversation of not just a substance but a process conversation. I think staff's recommendation was about substance. I think Councilmember Jawanda's is about process. I think the process is substantive in this case, particularly the time it takes to make a deal and the ease at which making a deal is one of the biggest reasons why somebody does or doesn't make a deal. Particularly when it comes to a business opening up a headquarters or not, or tries and gives up. And so I think that is a key part of it. I'm glad you brought it up. I also wanted to add, I think it'd be helpful just to get written quarterly reports. I think one of the challenges is, in the short time that I've been here, we get projects on an ad hoc, one-by-one basis until we get to the budget, and then get one long overview. But there's not a lot of understanding of what's happening in the middle of just what the accounts look like, in a basic report. I know we do get the annual report, and that's part of this process. But I think, I'd like to have we don't have to have a briefing each time necessarily, unless we want one based off of what we see in the report. But I think the Fed committee getting a quarterly briefing and then the full council getting the annual briefing, I think would be helpful for us to be, like I said before, it's just more engaged on an ongoing basis as part of the holistic program and not on a project-by-project programmatic basis. And I also think we need to look at each and every one of these programs. At the state level, the programs are all sunsetted. There is no such thing as an incentive program at the state level, from my understanding, that I can think of that doesn't have an automatic sunset that has to be renewed. We have some zeroed out programs here that we know don't work, that we're not appropriating new money to, but aren't sunsetted formally. And so I think, we ought to think about when we set up a new program, I will advocate to my colleagues that it ought to have an automatic sunset as part of that program. But I also think for the ones that aren't sunsetted, we ought to take a look over maybe a 2-year period and do a deep dive, not on the individual deals, but on the incentive programs themselves, and figure out, what are we getting? Is it good? Is it bad? Should we be putting more money into some of these programs? I bet there are some we should be putting a lot more money in, and are there some that we aren't really getting a whole lot of return out of the taxpayer dollars we're putting in, and maybe we should shift those resources over. And so I think 1 year might be too much to take on, but maybe over 2 years, and I'm open to figuring out what the time frame that would be appropriate. But I do think it would be helpful outside of the budget process to do a deep dive into each one of these incentive programs, and then to be able to come back during the budget and figure out how that can guide your recommendation and our final approval of how much money we're appropriating to these different programs.
Yeah, so I think those are great ideas and great insight, and we're happy to work on doing some sort of quarterly reports. I know that Justin Stone on my staff already does monthly updates on the Small Business Assistance Program and the Impact Assistance Fund, and I believe Councilmember Navarro and her staff receive those monthly updates. We have not done more regular updates on any of the other programs, but we can certainly look at pulling together some quarterly data and making sure that the Fed committee receives those.
Yeah, that'd be great.
that
One
information.
document, everything on
Yep.
it, send it over.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, good idea. So let's continue.
I guess just to wrap that up, we'll, again, this evening, we'll have the quarterly reports begin in fiscal 20. So the first quarter of fiscal 20 will be when we expect that. And then I'll work with the Fed committee members based on all of this to start scheduling meetings, and maybe more than one now, given Mr. Friedson's comments of doing a deeper dive for each program over a 2-year basis.
Yeah, well, let's.
Do you want to hold on? Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine.
look, it's a good idea. Let's think about it a little bit more. I don't know that we need to do a deeper dive on the green investor incentive program. There's nothing to dive into, but yes, generally we want to dive. I don't know. I'm not committing the schedule yet.
Understood.
So that's what I really mean to say. But I'm open to the idea. I think it's a good idea, and we'll follow up.
That's why I raised it.
That was a verbal pat on my head.
Staff just wants to make sure he knows his duties. So
No,
we'll move on.
Right.
Item B is the Small Business Revolving Loan Program. More or less, this is now a defunct program. We haven't made any loans in several fiscal years, primarily just due to the complexity and need for the county to have the right staff. There's one outstanding loan that we expect to close out soon. Based on finance staff's understanding, the funding that remains, which is $700,000, is free to be used for other programs. It's no longer needs to be required.
It is in this fund? There's 700,000 in the fund?
There is 700,000 that still remains roughly in the Small Business Revolving Loan Program. And staff, as recommends at the end, I think this would be a good place if we do a fall review to figure out how best to utilize these funds. Right now, it'll just be undesignated in the EDF. The 300, there was 300 set aside for the microloan program, and so I'm not including that. The 700 is what has not been used for anything yet.
Okay. Yeah, let's come back to the fall. I mean, this
All right.
ties into the strategic initiatives conversation with the EDC and others,
So, and the executive doesn't recommend any appropriation for this program this year, so there's nothing the council needs, or the committee needs to act on other than council staff's comments.
Okay, interesting. Well, just as a flag, in a moment, I'm going to propose that we move 250 from the incubator fund to the sorry, my wheels are spinning inside. There's the MOVE program, because we don't fully fund the MOVE program. We come up about 3/4. We run out of money 3/4 of the year, or the way through the year every year. This is another potential source of funding to fully fund the MOVE program as well. So I'll just mention that.
Absent the council making an appropriation for a specific purpose, the finance could use these funds for that.
I mean, it's interesting that they don't already do that. Why don't, my understanding, Mike, I guess I addressed this to you, I don't know, but MOVE kind of gets fully subscribed at about 3/4 of the way through the year. Lori?
So I can say that as of today, we have spent the entire $750,000 of the MOVE
Right.
program for this fiscal year.
And
The
why
reason
not?
the reason we haven't tapped into that 700,000 is it has been our position that because those funds were appropriated to use for a lending program, that it's probably more appropriate to use those for like the micro-lending program or another type of loan program, since that's what the funds were originally appropriated for. That's why we really haven't
Okay,
tapped into
that's a
that
good
for
reason.
any of the other programs.
All right, so we'll.
But I'm happy to take more money for the MOVE program if you'd like to do
Well,
that.
I do want to do that. We'll get to that in a moment, but, so we should come back in the fall to talk about this
Yeah, absolutely.
fund. Great idea. And in the meantime, I think we could leave it there. All right,
Very good.
Continuing?
Next one's the Biotechnology Investor Incentive Program. This is an entitlement program that piggybacks off of the state's program. So any investor that receives state tax credits for an investment in a biotech company in Montgomery County will receive a small supplement. On average, the state tax credits are 50% of their investment up to a certain figure. The county's supplement brings them up to almost a 58% return on some of their investments. So it's been a great program. It's been utilized fully every year, and the county executive recommends an additional $500,000 appropriation for fiscal 20. Staff recommends approval as recommended by the executive.
All right, this is one of the great programs we have in the biotech arena. All
Correct.
right.
The next one is the cybersecurity program. This is similar to the biotech program, though when the state envisioned it and passed a law, and the council passed a law similar to it, it was for the company, the cybersecurity company, not the investor like the biotech program.
Right, that was the law I authored, and we needed to fix it, yes.
Well, correct. Staff points out that the council will need to amend the law for it to operate the way the state law does now. The state amended their law in 2018 to go in effect for fiscal 19 that changed the recipient of the tax credit from the cybersecurity company to the cybersecurity investor. Based on the county law, we would not be able to disperse any funds because no cybersecurity company would receive tax credits anymore. I understand from finance staff that we might see an amendment proposed by the executive. Staff notes that the council doesn't need to wait for the executive on this. They can obviously amend the law whenever they wish.
Yeah, let's do that. Can you set the wheels going on that?
Certainly.
And then as far as the appropriation, you're recommending that we get the funds in the program back to 500,000.
Correct. There's
that means adding 136, or is the current finance 100?
That means that the council would need to appropriate $136,125 in fiscal 20 to put the program back to 500,000 with a rollover of $330,000.
And so, because this was not in the executive's budget.
I'm sorry, it was. And on page 2, it's noted that the executive intended to appropriate enough money to get to $500,000.
Okay, so this is
the executive's
agreeing
recommendation.
with their
We have to
recommendation.
agree to appropriate, to
Right.
agree with the executive to
Correct.
put 500,000 in. The delta is 136.
Good?
Yes. Okay.
Like that? But we do, but your point is it's not going to work unless we amend the law.
Correct. The money
Yeah.
will sit there and.
So let's get it going.
All right. Certainly, staff will work with a attorney to get that bill drafted soon. The next one is the Green Investor Incentive Program. The final $250,000 that was still in this was used for the Bethesda Green Incubator. The EDF annual report notes how that program is running. However, this program maintains itself in county law, but there is no appropriation recommended by the executive for this, and it never received any applicants. So council staff wouldn't recommend doing anything with it other than reviewing and seeing if it needs to stay in county law.
All right. I don't know quite why this hasn't worked, but that's a topic for another day.
Certainly. The next one is the Small Business Assistance Program. This is the program authored by several council members, Ms. Navarro in particular, to assist businesses that are impacted negatively during county redevelopment projects. The only project currently that qualifies for this is the one in Wheaton. We've been making disbursements for almost a year and a half now. The executive recommends $250,000 for this program again. There's going to be some rollover, and council staff recommends approval of the executive's recommendation for the Small Business Assistance Program. I'm sorry, my correction, the executive runs $450,000.
Okay,
My apologies.
Okay. Good. Rolling over.
Rolling over. The Equity Investment Program is, again, another program that exists but doesn't have an appropriation for it. We've made 3 investments. 2 of them failed. 1 is still ongoing. We're waiting to hopefully see that one come in someday. There's no recommended appropriation for this program in fiscal 20.
Okay. What is the company that is still out there?
Hang on a second, it's listed in your annual report that is in here. Yeah.
And why is it that we are allowed to do this, but BHI, which did this, got so much grief from the county attorneys. That's not for you, I guess.
Right. Cytomune is the company that is still in Montgomery County, still operating, that had received a $100,000 equity investment by the county. Cytomune, so a local life sciences company.
Okay, they're
here in
still
the
out
county.
there?
They are still out there, they're still operating, still doing well.
How big is the company?
I do not know those details. We can get back to you on the details of that if you're interested.
I'm just casually interested. Andrew?
Yeah, my only question on that, we discontinued this program because we weren't doing very well. But on that, the company is still in its existence. It's hiring, it has people who are working. We get tax revenue off of it. That's a good thing. So we actually are getting some benefit off of it right now, which is a positive. Do we make money on the exit? Is that, so we're keeping this as a program here, not appropriating any money, and if there is ever an exit, we would make some
That is correct.
undisclosed amount based on the deal that we have in place?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yep.
Moving on, the Impact Assistance Fund is next. This is not a program that's authorized by county law or even a regulation. It's run by the executive, and the program was refunded in fiscal 19 to benefit businesses that were impacted by the Silver Spring project, and then throughout throughout the year, there were additional designations made by the executive, and Mr. Elrich has made a designation up in Germantown. So there are 3 designated areas, and the recommendation for fiscal year 20 is another $150,000. $75,000 is anticipated rollover, and the way the program currently works, businesses can receive up to $25,000 based on their impact, and council staff recommends approval of the executive's recommendation for this program.
Okay, keep it moving.
Microlending, this program is in county law, but administered by finance through the EDF. They have 2 vendors, the Latino Economic Development Center and Life Asset, that they make $50,000. They pay $50,000 to based on actual microloans. There's information on Circle 15 about this program, and the executive is recommending $150,000 to continue funding this program in fiscal 20.
Great, it's been a good program so far. Andrew?
Because I believe this program was put in place, at least in part, by my predecessor, and so
That's
I'm
true,
glad
yes.
to see it's in place. Just had a question. I was looking at the numbers of the 2 organizations, because we basically have 2 organizations that are providing these loans themselves, at least based on the numbers, unless I'm looking at them wrong. One seems to be doing many more loans than the other. Is there a reason?
Well,
for that?
yes, so one of the vendors actually leveraged the county dollars and applied for an SBA grant so that they could enhance the program itself. So they just took the initiative to do that. I mean, the other vendor is doing a great job as well. And it's interesting that they both have different methods for doing their loans. The one who has done many more microloans do a lot of loans in the $500 to $5,000 range, and the second vendor does much larger loans. They're actually making loans $10,000 to $25,000 loans. So they have different philosophies for their microlending programs, but I think they've both been very successful. One of the vendors, though, just took the initiative and applied for additional federal SBA funds to enhance the dollars that they had to loan.
Okay, so it's leverage.
Correct.
Because I've got one at 128 loans provided at almost 291,000, and the other at 11 loans made at a little over 89,000. There's a pretty big discrepancy in the number.
Right, and again, so the one organization leveraged the $50,000 grant tranche of money from the county and applied for this federal SBA grant to enhance their pot of money.
Have we talked about the other organization and maybe see if they could leverage?
I can certainly,
SBA
I mean, we
loan?
can
I mean-
certainly let them know that but the other organization also has multiple other lending opportunities through their existing programs. So my guess is that they're providing other loans to Montgomery County companies that are not reliant on the $50,000 tranche of money that they can get through the county, but I can certainly reach out to them and ask if they've ever considered leveraging those funds with federal dollars.
That'd be great. So the numbers we have here are not just the money this is not just based off the
That's
money that we're
correct.
providing. This
Yeah.
is the total amount of loans they're doing?
I asked them if they could break out just the $50,000, and it was impossible for them to do because they lumped all the money together in one big pot. So they've got their big pot of Montgomery County microlending money. So.
Well, I'm more scared now than when I started asking questions, but
But they've still
that's a
only
conversation
gotten
for another day.
that's
But I
right.
think that we do need to have anybody who's getting county money to be able to segregate the money out and assess what it's doing, to throw money into a pot with other funds in there and to count it. I mean, there's just no way to assess how it's doing.
Well, the great news is they were able to take that $50,000 from the county and leverage it to over $200,000 available to provide microloans to small local Montgomery County businesses. So, that's
That
the
is the good
positive way of
news.
looking at it.
That
so.
is the good news. I will stick to the positive for today,
Excellent.
but
Thank you.
hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that, because
Absolutely.
I think this is a terrific, and I was on the Maryland Small Business Development Financing
Great.
Authority. I understand the value of providing small business loans and how it can be the difference and create jobs and opportunities. And I am a huge believer in it, and I think it's terrific, and I am totally supportive of doing this, and want to double down on it. But if we were going to do something like add more money to this in future years, I'd like to know specifically, what do we get out of each residual additional dollar that we put in? And if we can't assess that in a serious and substantive way, then I think it's going to be hard to justify additional resources.
And we can sit down with each of the vendors before FY20's funding becomes available to them and discuss some of those specific metrics
I
with
would
them.
love for you to do that, and thank you for
Absolutely.
committing to it.
Sure.
All right.
The
SBIR,
Correct.
terrific new program. Salute to Councilmember Leventhal, who proposed this. It's been great. Really, it's a very clean, simple program that goes to one of our strength sectors. So,
Yep. Executive is recommending $425,000 for this program in fiscal 20, and staff recommends approval.
okay, and that's the same amount as last time. I thought we added to it.
It's the same that was appropriated in the fiscal 20 budget, but then Mr. Leventhal and the council agreed to add a supplemental appropriation midway through the year that was $225,000. But the appropriation in the fiscal 20 budget is the same as the recommended fiscal 19 appropriation.
It's a secret cut to the SBIR program.
Well, staff will also note that there's approximately $100,000 that will roll over from.
Oh, they weren't able to get all the money out the door?
Well, it goes out the door based on applications. So when businesses receive an SBIR grant from the federal agency, so there's $100,000 that will remain in fiscal 19. If someone applies, say in May, they would receive part of that, and we would appropriate additional $425 for additional businesses on top of whatever rolls over for fiscal 20.
Is this program one that is eligible for the undesignated reserve or other unspent reserves?
Well, this is actually in county code, and it's very specific. So half of the appropriated funds are to be used for Phase 1 SBIR grant recipients, and half of the appropriated funds are to be used for Phase 2 SBIR grant recipients. So that would make it a little tricky to dip into to that undesignated reserve, because that would throw our 50-50 split out of balance unless we appropriated an amount and
I'm
split
not
it.
following the kind of core thing here. Are you saying, Gene, that you said there's 100,000 left for the rest of the year? That's probably about what you would expect to be left for the rest of the year. That doesn't mean that they're underspending, really, right?
So the $100,000 that's remaining in the SBIR for FY19 is specifically designated for Phase 1 SBIR grant recipients, and they can receive a maximum of $25,000. So I could get 4 more Phase 1 applications in the next 2 months, and all that money would be out
What
the
did we
door.
do in this fall when we added funding to it? What did we do? We added it.
You added
Phase 1 or
225.
Phase 2.
It was 225 was added, and we split that supplemental 50-50 between Phase 1 and Phase 2, as
So it's
is
125 for
specifically
each.
spelled out in the county code.
125 for each is how we split.
It was 112,500
Oh, 112.
because it was 225 was the
Your
supplemental.
math is better
So,
than mine.
yeah.
Well, what if we were to move some of the funding from the SBLRP to get to the same level we had for FY19 for the small SBIR? Is that enough acronyms for you?
Well, it gets back to we had not done anything with that because this isn't really a loan, this is a grant program, and we
No,
had reserved.
I didn't ask why you didn't do it. I understood
Sure.
previously that you said you
Yes.
didn't feel like that was appropriate, so.
Right.
I'm saying, why don't we do it?
Yeah.
Gene, is there any reason why we couldn't do that, or?
We could appropriate a certain amount in fiscal 20 based on what we would want the program to be at. Council staff would probably recommend putting it on the reconciliation list so that it competes with other items.
Could we note that it's disappropriate, like we're reducing the appropriation to the SB?
The council doesn't appropriate by program in the EDF, which is why the packet details as much as it does.
The SBLRP?
Correct.
Is not, there's no appropriation there, it's all just sitting there. We're not reappropriating, we've already appropriated.
Yeah, it's accounting. So certainly, if there's a number that you would like to see, you could, as we go into fiscal 20, we would appropriate a certain amount based on committee's recommendation.
So could we get back to the FY19 amount and then just, it can go on the rec list, but we could say we're recommending it come from that reserve?
Sure, I can do that. Is there a
My
total you want
colleagues
to, is
agree
there a
with that?
total you want to get to? I
was just saying the same amount we ended up with at, in FY19. That was a good.
The 650,
Thank
I
you.
think is what it's, yeah.
It's another
225.
20.
And we think we're going to use the full 650. I mean, is that what we're basing this off of, the 650?
So the Phase 2 funds actually go pretty quickly because those grants are at a $75,000 level. So we kind of burn through those Phase 1 grant matches much more quickly than the Phase 1 grants, which are a maximum of $25,000. But it's
Don't we
very-
have a pretty good idea because of the
do.
pipeline of what the
Actually,
Phase
our-
1s are 25, the Phase 2s are 75, a certain percentage of the Phase 1s become Phase 2. So we kind of know, they might not all come in at exactly when you expect them to, and they might not all come to fruition, but don't you have a pretty good idea of what that pipeline looks like and what the needs are for the program?
We do, and on average, I think when this was originally brought in front of council, the recommendation was for $800,000 to fund the
Yeah,
program?
but I think it was 850.
850, right.
It was 850, and that's why it was split. So they put 425 in
425,
it
right.
initially, and they put 425 on the reconciliation list, but it never came off the reconciliation
That was last
list.
year?
That was last year, that's
Yeah.
correct. And the 850, that was
The
pretty
count-
close to it. Some years it could have been higher, some years could have been a little bit lower. I think some years it was over $1 million. So 850 was the original estimate.
It doesn't stay in the account, or it does stay in the account year over year?
I'm sorry?
Does it stay in the account year over year, or does it not stay in the account? We have to reappropriate it
It's-
every year?
I thought it was a revolving.
It's part of the EDF.
So to clarify, the executive in fiscal 19 didn't recommend any money for this program, and the Fed committee put on 2 tranches of 425, and only 1 tranche made it off, which is why in fiscal 20, as far as the base budget's concerned, the 425 starts in there, and the executive is recommending maintaining that. That's how we got to 425 in this base budget, and that any money that's left over will roll over, which is the 100,000 we're talking about. But if we wanted to augment the program beyond that, then it would need to be added for fiscal 20.
Right. It's my understanding also that there are 2 certification periods. So it's not necessarily that just because we've issued, 650 or 550?
550 so far.
It doesn't mean that we're over with. We could suddenly get more requests or applications in.
Right, NIH makes their federal grant awards at different periods throughout the year, so we never know, actually, there may be a month where we end up getting a half a dozen applications in.
Yeah, I'm for it, but my only concern is last year, the county executive wasn't totally behind it. We came in and said, we want to do this. The money, 425,000 isn't spent. Well, 425 is 425, there's 425,000 left in the account.
No, there's
right?
only 100,000 left currently in the account.
So we put
From the 650, from the 425 plus the 225 supplemental that was made in the
We added 225 and a
fall.
supplemental in the fall.
That's correct.
So the total amount put in there in FY19
Was
was
650,000 total.
Got it. Okay,
and
then
we
I'm
only
fine
have
with
100,000
But
left.
the base budget amount, I didn't realize the supplemental amount didn't roll into the base budget. So the base budget amount was 425, and that's the new recommendation
That's
for
correct.
FY20 is back to that lower base level. I'm saying let's at least get it back up to what we
To the 650.
had for 650.
And where's the money coming from on this?
I'm suggesting it comes from the SBLRP, which has $700,000 idle.
And just to clarify, if we're putting on the rec list, we have to cut from that separately and then add to it separately, and the cut has to be accepted by the full council, and the add has to be separately? Is that what you were suggesting?
Staff will just note
That's what
where
I'm
the funding
suggesting.
source is coming from on the rec list. So that
Staff will note
as,
the funding
yeah.
source on the rec list. That will inform people as they make their decisions. Will?
question on, so the loan program, the small business revolving loan program, it's stated in the packet that county doesn't have expertise anymore to manage it as a reason for its underutilization. And I know we have the micro lending, we have this. Just could you tell me a little bit why it's fallen, other than the fact that, why are we not using it anymore, and what are the issues, just briefly?
Well, so small business loan programs are actually not easy to implement, and it's not just about reviewing loan documents and doing the underwriting necessary to see if businesses are qualified, but it's also the follow-up and the monthly repayments of principal and interest and keeping track of all
A lot of red tape.
It is a lot of red tape. It is a lot of specifics and
Hasn't yielded
if
the-
somebody defaults, do you then take acquisition of assets from them? Does the county want to get into that type of thing?
Right.
So there are a lot of pieces that kind of go into a revolving loan program like that
Yeah, good.
that
I
are
just think-
difficult to manage.
That obviously aren't as much of an issue in the micro lending context.
It's
Because you're
the nice
giving
thing
that
about
to the
micro-lending is
organizations.
we subcontract that to
subcontract.
vendors who already have that infrastructure in place to do the loans.
I'm just
So-
wondering, if you're a medium-sized business, or, you have an idea, where, in our suite of services, and you need a loan, where do you go?
So it depends.
And you're not in the
I mean-
biotech, and you're not in one of the specific areas.
So what I would do is refer them to my partners at MCEDC to talk about any, to work with them to identify.
So within the EDF, there's really not, it's what we got here, and that's.
So it depends. If it's a new mid-sized company coming into the county, leasing space for the first time, they probably qualify for a move
right.
program.
Right. But as far as
They
like
could get an
capital,
incentive.
you could get an incentive. But if you live here and you have an idea for a business and you want to get help with the loan for access to capital reasons, and if it's not a micro loan and you don't go through that, I'm just pointing out there's a gap.
There are gaps. Yeah, absolutely, there are gaps, and
so I
that's-
just want to.
There was a gap, there is a gap,
Yeah.
and that was why this program was created initially, was to try to speak to that need.
Right, and then we found it's too hard. We thought it was a little too hard to administer. We weren't, I just want to talk about. I'm hesitant to abandon the idea of that area. Because
That's why this program is, that's why this money is sat in this fund for year after year.
Right, I get it. I'm just
Yeah.
saying. I'm not necessarily
Well,
against it, but I want to talk about this more holistically as we move going forward. If you want to move a little bit now, I don't have a big
Okay.
problem with that, but.
If I can add, the county, for several years, we actually deposit money, county money, with small banks, with local banks.
That was an
And
initiative I
there
spearheaded, thank you very much, Mr.
Right,
President.
and so the requirement for that is that they make loans to small business as a result of that. So we have about $50 million sitting with local banks. And
How much you
in that
said?
$50 million.
Million.
50 million. And the requirement is that the local bank also adds, they match that share, so there's about $100 million in that case going out into the community to small businesses. So there
better
is
way to-
equity, there's liquidity available for small businesses.
And the rates, okay, well, that's just money we've given to banks, and they're operating under the rates and terms, whatever their normal business practices
That's
are.
right.
That's correct.
And that's the
correct.
Small Business Plus program, which is not an EDF program.
Okay.
But Small Business
But
Navigator
it-
promotes
but
that
it-
program.
but it serves the same community.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you, that's helpful.
I mean, it's an interesting topic area, no question about it, and something you may want to pursue. All right. Okay. Continuing, we're now to the MOVE program.
Correct.
All right, so I mentioned that I wanted to add some funding here because generally what I understand is that the program is oversubscribed, or we run out of funding about 3/4 of the year. I do think we want to have some conversations soon about the program and the strategy of the program. There might be some other ways we can structure it. There might be other types of office buildings that we want to open it up to, or places we want to target it to geographically, but I don't think we need to really get into that today. So in the next topic item, we're taking up the incubator, and there $750,000 that is not allocated, is that, or is removed, is that right?
There is $750,000 that gets maneuvered to different places. Only $230,000 roughly is eliminated by recommendation from the county executive in that budget. The remainder is maneuvered to other places, such as the business services hub, the kitchen incubator, et cetera.
And personnel.
Yeah, the business service hub.
Okay, but that is in the proposal. If we had a counter proposal to put some of that money into the MOVE program, how would that work?
I guess thinking off my head, you would need to target the money that you would not want to reallocate from the incubator NDA and not recommend approval of the executive's recommendation, and then whatever that number is, you could then cut from the incubator NDA and recommend that that's the funding source for any enhancements to the MOVE program.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that sounds pretty good. I'm not sure about the implications for other proposed uses of it. We'll have to talk about that. But.
Sure. I maybe given the time, and I'm not sure how far we'll get through the incubator NDA, I would recommend maybe the committee consider adding whatever you're thinking, Mr. Reamer, to the reconciliation list for MOVE. And then during the incubator NDA packet, we could discuss the funding source based on the committee's recommendation for that. Does that make sense?
Sure. Comments? Andrew.
Will was going to go first, but yeah, I don't have an issue with it. My view on the incubator, when we get to that conversation, I do have some real serious concerns about moving money, one-time money from the incubator program that we don't know what it's going to look like, and we don't know what the plan is, into personnel, which is essentially what is being proposed here, which really does scare me. And I've raised that concern in previous meetings. I will raise it again moving forward. I'm okay with business-related one-time expenses that could be revisited and reappropriated. And I think it's a more appropriate way to reallocate those funds if there's concern that we're not going to spend them because we don't know what the incubator program is going to look like. And we don't want to have money sitting in an account. We want it out on the street and helping folks create jobs and going into people's pockets through their wages and through economic activity. I am very open to that conversation, but I am extremely concerned with where the proposal is on the incubators of shifting the money, as I've said before, from a one-time savings in one program to ongoing expenses, which, by the way, we're going to have to come back and fund incubators because that has been a huge priority that has been stated by the county executive, and we're looking forward to hearing what that proposal looks like. So the proposal, as I see it, on the incubators that we're going to get to, looks extremely expensive to me and has serious ongoing financial implications that I don't think we have heard what the plan is for those. And so this would be, I think, and we'll talk about it, I guess, more in that situation, but what I think is a more financially prudent way to address the extra incubator money that we don't think we're going to be, potentially using, at least in the first half of this fiscal year as the consultant gets brought on and the plan gets developed and the ideas get fleshed out, which, really haven't been fully fleshed out to the council to date. So I'd be supportive.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to pause here. I don't know that we can get into the incubator because I really do have a hard stop in about 5 minutes. But we have time on Friday, so we can, we do have time on Friday, so we can, sorry, I'm not asking, I'm saying, I know that we have time on Friday, so we could come back to the incubator discussion such as it is then. But for now, we've got agreement about adding $250 for the MOVE program, and then you're recommending that we schedule a review of the EDF programs in the fall to just kind of talk big picture. Is that what you
Right.
think?
Well, and based on the committee's conversation, it sounds like there was also inclusion of processes for Mr. Jawando,
Yep.
and then Mr. Friedson had talked about doing a deep dive of maybe tweaking the staff's recommendation a little bit to to look at only a few programs at a time rather than the whole carte blanche, but
Yeah,
again,
maybe,
I
maybe
defer
you
to
want
the
to pick a
committee.
couple that you really want to focus on.
Okay, okay, I can work with the committee. If we're going to do a fall review, I can work with the committee in terms of working with finance staff and our colleagues to have a process conversation and a deep dive of certain programs, including the 700,000 or.
Yeah, I think it could be, I mean, I see it as kind of a two-part aspect of it, besides the written quarterly reports, which we look forward to having, which I think will be really helpful. But, you know, I think the holistic, here's what the whole EDF program looks like, where we could talk about it, where we're not under the gun in the middle of a budget, but we can actually think about it strategically and have the collaborative, communicative approach that, you know, I appreciate the executive branch is looking to have on this from a holistic standpoint of looking at these. And then, you know, I think beginning the process of picking, you know, one by one or, you know, a couple at a time related programs, and what are we getting out of the MOVE program? You know, this isn't creating a lot of jobs. Is it helping the businesses we have here? We still have, you know, significant office vacancies. Is it helping, you know, stop the bleeding so it's not worse, or is it, you know, really, you know, moving it in the right direction? Is this the best approach? Do we need to add more money to it because it's oversubscribed? I mean, or is it not moving the needle as much? And so I think that's the type of, you know, conversation that I think we, you know, can and should have of, you know, what are we getting out of each of these programs? Are they doing what we thought they were going to do? Since we haven't sunsetted them, we haven't forced ourselves to have these conversations and coming back to the table every year and just adding more money and not being intentional about should we add significantly more to one or the other? Is it doing what we thought? Just because it's being accessed doesn't mean it's getting what we want out of it. And I think we can have that conversation then.
Okay.
All right.
And just to clarify, Mr. Reamer, you were suggesting adding 250,000 to the rec list for the MOVE program?
I am, and I will talk about funding sources
next time.
I don't anticipate that would likely get funded from general revenue, but there might be the possibility of getting it funded otherwise. So, okay.
That would finish the EDF packet.
Yep.
So.
And that finishes our work for the day.
Very good.
So we'll meet again on Friday at 2 o'clock regarding the incubator program.
Correct. Well, I'll work with, there are already some items, so I'll work with the clerk to figure out where that item will get scheduled, since there's urban districts and a couple other makeup items.
Okay. Great. Thank you.